9 years later, in 1995, Detective Werner was still at it. He was tracking down and interviewing people he felt had never been ruled out to his satisfaction. And there were quite a few. One of them was the jogger who had called in the odor leading to Jenny's being found, named Leslie Yu. Detective Werner interviewed one of the men running with Leslie that day to make sure his story about discovering the smell held up. Then he requested Leslie to take a polygraph, which he did and passed. He also gave a blood sample, and his O-negative blood was inconsistent with the type of blood Michela's killer had. Soon, 1996 rolled around, and it was the 10th anniversary of that horrible summer when both girls were slain. Detective Larry Island still had 2 banker's boxes of case materials in his office and remained convinced that both Jenny and Michela fell victim to the same depraved killer. He felt he would strike again unless he was in prison or dead. In 2000, a potential suspect emerged that motivated Tacoma investigators to conduct some new testing in Michela and Jenny's cases. This was Ryan L. Ryan had been arrested in Concord, California in 1987 and charged with assault to commit rape and sexual penetration with a foreign object for a rape he had committed in Newhall Park. Ryan was 16 at the time. His victim was only 11. In 2000, police received a tip that Ryan had been staying in the Tacoma area with his older brother Randall at the time Jenny and Michela were killed. By now, STR DNA testing was the norm, and police realized that they needed to retest samples and evidence in Michela's case, the only one of the two where they had DNA-rich semen. So in March 2000, swabs from Michela's thighs and rectal and vaginal cavities were submitted to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab for testing and comparison with blood reference standards for Ryan L. But the Tacoma authorities wanted to take advantage of the testing to rule out some other OG suspects as well. They had to obtain the blood from some of their suspects from the original lab that had done the blood type testing, Forensic Science Associates. Forensic Science Associates sent dried blood samples from Randy Cezanne and Gerald Friend, as well as a sample from Michela herself, to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab in March 2000. A subsequent crime lab report by criminalist Edward Blake reported that the type of sperm DNA from the rectal and vaginal swabs occurred in only 3% of the population, but both Gerald Friend and Randy Cezanne were eliminated as the sperm donors in Michela's case. Detectives' notes read, "There are currently no known suspects." Okay, fast forward more than half a decade. Investigators with the Tacoma Police Department got their first break in 2006. In May of 2006, analyst Jeremy Sanderson of the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab was able to develop a male DNA profile from the rectal swabs collected at Michela's autopsy that was suitable for entry into CODIS. Unfortunately, there were no hits in the state or federal databases. Michela's killer was not in the databases, and his DNA had not been found at other crime scenes. The DNA profile was used to officially rule out 3 men, the old suspects Randy Cezanne and Gerald Friend, and Randy C., the boy who had been the last one to see Michela at Puget Park. In 2009, Tacoma PD Detective Gene Miller was assigned to develop a cold case unit within the homicide unit. This involved identifying all unresolved homicide and missing persons cases, ensuring the complete case files were up to date, and evaluating them for potential follow-up investigation. There were more than 250 unsolved homicide cases under the unit's umbrella, but 2 of the cases at the top of the list were Michela's and Jenny's. Patty Bastian had pushed for establishment of the cold case unit to make sure cases like Michela's and Jenny's were not forgotten. Detective Miller realized that while there was DNA in Michela's case, there was none in Jenny's. In April of 2012, he requested testing of the foreign pubic hairs found in Jenny's case, looking for a root base to permit DNA analysis and comparison to the DNA in Michela's case. In 2013, Detective Gene Miller and Detective Lindsay Wade, a seasoned homicide and sex crimes detective who joined the cold case team, presented the cases to a panel of experts at NCMEC just to see if fresh eyes would result in any new ideas. After that meeting, they released to the public a profile of sorts, which included that the girl's killer likely lived in Tacoma's North End, and he was very familiar with the parks in the area. He may even have been a transient living in the parks. He probably carried a knife and did not have stable employment. He rode a bike or got around on foot. He was generally unkempt and had a disease called Strongyloides cercoralis, which, quote, would eventually have caused abdominal pain, heartburn, a dry cough, rashes, and intermittent episodes of diarrhea and constipation, end quote. Remember, the evidence of an intestinal parasite found in Michela's killer's feces. And this killer's life of crime likely started small with peeping or exposure cases. The 2013 cold case detectives also arranged for more updated DNA testing. Only partial trace-level male autosomal DNA profiles were detected in the hairs. The forensic lab confirmed that 3 hairs from Jenny's scene were Caucasian human pubic hairs from the same source that were not consistent with Jenny. With further testing, the Minnesota DPS lab, which had a grant to pay for mitochondrial DNA testing, was able to obtain mitochondrial DNA from the pubic hairs under Jenny and also from the hairs on Michela. This allowed them to conduct a direct comparison. A Minnesota DPS lab report dated October 30th, 2013, stated that the pubic hairs from Jenny's scene and pubic hairs collected at Michela's autopsy had different mitochondrial DNA sequences. They did not come from a common source. Are you getting this? The pubic hairs on the 2 girls came from 2 different men. Was it possible that after all these years, Michela's and Jenny's cases weren't connected after all? Tacoma investigators knew they desperately needed an STR DNA profile in Jenny's case to enter into CODIS, and now also to compare to Michela's DNA evidence. So in a Hail Mary pursuant to a suggestion from the NCMEC panel, Tacoma detectives sent Jenny's one-piece bathing suit in for analysis to the WSP Crime Lab forensics team. On November 25, 2013, testing using a forensic light source on the crotch area of Jenny's bathing suit caused 3 areas to fluoresce. The 3 areas were sampled and extracts created. In short, the testing on the extracts detected semen. A partial male DNA profile was obtained from the sperm fraction of one of the areas of the bathing suit crotch. This area had never been tested before because they assumed Jenny had been sexually assaulted after her bathing suit was pulled down. Remember, it was found down around her ankle, so the crotch area was nowhere near her genital region. But this evidence indicated that her bathing suit had perhaps been in place when she was assaulted, or that she had redressed after the assault and prior to her murder. Comparisons of the DNA sample from Jenny's case and the DNA sample from Michela's case confirmed it. The physical evidence pointed to 2 different offenders. All that work put into chasing a serial child killer. All those years of ruling people out because they had an alibi for the date of one of the murders, or their hair didn't resemble the hair found on one of the girls. All that was out the window. The new offender DNA profile for Jenny's assailant was entered into CODIS in 2013. Just as in Michela's case, no matches were found. There were 2 men who had killed girls in 1986 in Tacoma whose DNA was not in the system, and it was entirely possible that they were both walking around free. Detective Gene Miller of the cold case unit remarked at the time, quote, "My personal opinion is he's going to get caught. It's just a matter of whether we get to put the bracelets on him. We have the DNA. All we need is the name." So you can predict the next steps taken by the investigators. Now that they had a juicy new DNA profile in Jenny's case, it inspired them to round up the old suspects and start a DNA elimination campaign. Detective Miller initiated the creation of a spreadsheet to track all suspects that had not been eliminated by DNA. The spreadsheet contained suspects that were part of the original investigation, new suspects developed through the review of old police reports or new leads, sexual offenders identified with no DNA in CODIS, or those names that came in as tips. Then teams of detectives and FBI agents set about obtaining DNA samples. In 2014, the lab reports started rolling in, one by one, excluding all the suspects we talked about earlier and more. Gordon C., Richard W., Clifford D., Andrew W., and on and on and on. It was disappointment after disappointment. The list of men excluded extended to 2.5 pages of single lines of names. Finally, Detective Gene Miller, who had led the way on all this testing, retired in December 2014. Detective Lindsay Wade was on her own. In February 2015, Detective Wade was fully invested in this case. Michela and Jenny had been killed when Detective Wade was an 11-year-old Tacoma child herself, a peer of the murdered girls. Their cases defined her childhood from that time on and helped determine her career choices. Now, in 2015, she took it upon herself to digitize the case file and to flesh out the list of names of men compiled by Detective Jean Miller. She started a database of names and indicated whether they had been eliminated by DNA or incarceration at the time of the murders. There were more than 2,300 names in the database by the time she was done, and only 350 or so had been eliminated. She began to think about a priority list and how to narrow the field. Detective Wade had heard about the groundbreaking work on YSTR DNA analysis being done by Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick of Identifinders International. Dr. Fitzpatrick had identified a perpetrator in Arizona based on Y-DNA analysis. Detective Wade contacted Dr. Fitzpatrick and spoke with her about what could be done. A quote from Detective Wade's report, quote, "During my conversation with Dr. Fitzpatrick, I learned that she has worked with law enforcement in the past on unsolved cases where a suspect DNA profile has been generated, but there are no matches in CODIS. Dr. Fitzpatrick explained that a YSTR profile must be developed in order for her to run the profile through her genealogy databases and conduct her analysis, looking for a last name associated with the paternal line related to the YSTR profile. This information can be used as an investigative lead in an attempt to identify the unknown offender. I advised Dr. Fitzpatrick that I had 2 unsolved homicides with suspect DNA profiles, but no matches in CODIS. We agreed that I would have YSTR profiles generated and then send the profiles to her for analysis." End quote. Just a quick explanation here. You'll recall that Y chromosomes are passed down from fathers to their sons. There are software and databases out there that categorize haplogroups, clusters of people who share the same Y chromosome SNPs. And these databases track surnames associated with these haplogroups, as surnames are, at least in Western culture, traditionally inherited from the paternal ancestor. So there was some hope that if they had the Y-DNA profile of the offender in Jenny's and Michelle's cases, they would have a list of names that he could possibly have. Detective Wade submitted a request to the WSP Crime Lab for YSTR testing to be done on the DNA extracts from the Welch and Bastian cases. The Y filer kit used identified alleles on the Y chromosome at 17 loci, and alleles from 16 out of 17 loci were obtained in Jenny's case, and 17 out of 17 were obtained in Michelle's case. In April 2015, Detective Wade sent the WSP Crime Lab reports documenting the YSTR profiles for both cases to Dr. Fitzpatrick. By May 19th, the doctor had provided results. Jenny Bastian's killer possibly had the last name Smith, Holbrook, or Washburn. Detective Wade was admittedly a little skeptical about the accuracy of these results. It was 2015, and haplogroups, SNPs, genealogy, they were unheard of except to a very small subset of people like Dr. Fitzpatrick, who told me that the Tacoma folks looked at her work at the time like it was a little bit of snake oil quackery. Detective Wade had also decided to look into another new DNA technology that was little heard of at the time. This was Parabon's new phenotype analysis, which uses molecular phenotyping information in SNP DNA profiles to predict ancestry admixture and some facial and physical features. In January of 2015, she contacted Paula Armentrout at Parabon Nanolabs, and they discussed submission of DNA in Jenny and Michelle's cases. But first, SNP profiles would have to be created for both. DNA analyst Jeremy Sanderson at the WSP Crime Lab confirmed that there was ample DNA extract remaining in both cases to complete the SNP testing. Sanderson estimated that there were 30 nanograms of DNA extract remaining from the sperm fraction in the Welch case and 69 nanograms of DNA extract from the sperm fraction remaining in the Bastian case. On August 3, 2015, Detective Wade collected the DNA extracts from both girls' cases and FedExed them for SNP testing at a private lab, Okisogen. From there, the SNPs were provided to Parabon. The FBI shelled out $7,000 for phenotype reports on the suspects. While she waited for results, Detective Wade followed up with some other avenues of investigation. She submitted Jenny's white aerobics sneakers for latent print analysis, but tests came back negative. She resubmitted 3 latent prints from Jenny's bike frame to APHIS and the FBI and came up empty. She resubmitted the baling twine found around Jenny's neck for analysis. She requested testing on Michelle's right thigh swabs to be sure the semen there was consistent with that in her rectal swabs. It was. There were no breakthroughs, and the cold case team went all in on the phenotypes, hoping they would finally provide answers. Meanwhile, in 2015, Ralph Bastian passed away. He never knew who killed his little girl. Patty Bastian and Detective Wade grew close as the investigator worked to provide answers to the shrinking family. In 2016, a massive media campaign was done to remind the public that Michela's and Jenny's cases were unsolved. On April 6th, a press conference was held at the Pierce County Department of Emergency Management. During the press conference, new details about the killers were released to the public for the first time. Most important of these was the fact that investigators now knew that Jenny and Michela had been killed by two different men, and they released composite images of the suspects based on their DNA. Parabon's snapshot report for the suspect in Jenny's case indicated he had an admixture that was 51% Central Eastern European and 43.4% Northwestern European. He had blue or green eyes and blonde or red hair, was fair or very fair-skinned, and had few freckles. His face was long, and he had a nose that was wide at the bridge. Michela's killer snapshot showed that he was 88.5% from Central or Eastern Europe, and he had 9% Native North American heritage. He had fair skin and brown or hazel eyes with darker blonde hair. His face appeared rounder, with a wider nose and fuller cheeks. According to the Tacoma News-Tribune, the TPD was only the 5th law enforcement agency in the country to use the phenotype technology and release the suspect composites to the public. Tacoma authorities said they hoped that releasing the snapshot descriptions of the two killers would help the public generate new leads. 125 tips were called in. Over the next few months, these were all run down and investigated. In early 2017, Patty Bastian wrote a letter to Tacoma Police Chief John Batiste asking why the Washington State Crime Lab could not employ familial DNA searching. Remember that this technique involves searching the state's DNA database for direct male relatives of the unknown offender. Chief Batiste told Patty in a March 2017 letter that while familial searching is not used in Washington, his agency was holding meetings with the prosecutor's office and the FBI to explore other means of progressing Jenny's and Michela's cases. Consequently, Detective Wade reached out to Dr. Barbara Ray Venter about the genealogy work she was doing, even before the Golden State Killer case broke. Detective Wade's report says, quote, "In August 2016, I learned of a genealogy consultant in California named Dr. Barbara Ray Venter, who worked with law enforcement on cases involving unknown DNA profiles. I contacted Dr. Ray Venter by phone and discussed the Bastian and Welch cases with her. She agreed to assist with the cases." Detective Wade sent Dr. Ray Venter the extracts on August 8, 2017. She began the process of conducting genealogical research using the SNP profiles of Jenny's and Michela's killers. Meanwhile, using the phenotype information about the two killers the Tacoma authorities sought, Detective Wade compiled a list of 161 priority men in the case file who had yet to be eliminated. These were mostly men who had committed sex crimes, but there were others too. Teams of detectives and FBI agents were assigned to contact and collect DNA samples from these high-priority suspects. The result was that 161 new DNA samples were collected throughout late 2016 and early 2017. The majority were suspects in Washington state, but 41 were out-of-state persons of interest. As the buccal swab samples trickled in, Detective Wade cataloged them and submitted them to DNA labs for comparison testing, using funds provided to her by the U.S. Marshals. This was done in alphabetical order, as her massive database of names was organized by surnames from A to Z. The first several batches, comprising 143 samples, all came back with the same results, negative for a DNA match to the suspect DNA. Finally, on January 4, 2018, Detective Wade sent the last batch of 18 samples remaining from the 2016 and 2017 DNA collection campaign to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab for analysis, with a final request to compare the profiles from these individuals to the unknown suspect profile from Michela's and Jenny's cases. Before the results came back, Detective Wade retired from the TPD in April 2018. She joined the Washington State Attorney General's office as an investigator in the SAKI, or Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Unit. And as it turned out, in Jenny's case, they didn't need the genealogy. Detective Stephen Riopel took over where Detective Wade had left off, and in early May 2018, he got a report that knocked the socks off pretty much everyone in the department. The WSP Crime Lab had gotten a DNA hit on one of the voluntary samples submitted in Jenny's case. His name was Robert Washburn. He was one of the men on Detective Wade's list of priority, out-of-state men to test. FBI agents had knocked on Robert Washburn's door in Eureka, Illinois on March 6, 2017, and requested a voluntary DNA sample. It matched the DNA found on Jenny Bastian's bathing suit crotch. So who was this Washburn guy and how did he come to be DNA tested? Well, you'll remember that in 2015, one of the novel techniques that Detective Lindsay Wade explored to try to solve this case was Y-DNA analysis. She provided Dr. Fitzpatrick with a Y-DNA profile for the two unknown suspects. And once Dr. Fitzpatrick ran the profiles through her Y-DNA databases, she provided Detective Wade with 3 possible surnames for the killer in Jenny's case. The surnames were Holbrook, Smith, and Washburn. For obvious reasons, the last name Smith was not particularly helpful. The name Holbrook was not mentioned in either case file whatsoever. However, there was a mention of a Robert Washburn. He was not a suspect but a tipster. Washburn had called in a tip on May 14, 1986, regarding the Michelle Welch murder. Well, in the 2016 to 2017 campaign to collect DNA from a priority group of men, Detective Wade had included the name Robert Washburn. So many men had already been tested, they were going deep into the list of 2,300 names in the case file. Washburn's name was in the case file as a witness, not a suspect. But since Dr. Fitzpatrick had found the name Washburn in her Y-DNA database, why not check it? The Y-DNA haplogroup prediction of his surname catapulted Washburn onto a list of men selected for DNA testing, even though there was no other reason to consider him a suspect. On March 6, 2017, FBI agents Jose Munoz and Gregory Spencer contacted Washburn at his home at 707 East Bullock, Apartment A in Eureka, Illinois. The agents introduced themselves and asked Washburn if he was willing to provide a DNA sample, and he said he was. Washburn was presented with a Tacoma police consent form for DNA collection, which he voluntarily signed. The buccal swabs were placed into evidence and sent to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab by Detective Wade on January 4, 2018. It turned out that Washburn had been interviewed by Detective Wolf Werner on December 15, 1986, at his residence, located at 3144 North Huson Street. Washburn stated he had been laid off from work, so he went to Point Defiance Park almost every day. He jogged the trails in the park as much as twice a day and walked the streets once a day. He stated he called the Tacoma PD because he had seen a man who matched the composite sketch of a suspect in the Welch case near the rhododendron garden in Point Defiance Park. Actually, he'd seen the guy a number of times. He said he would get the plate number of the guy's car the next time he saw him. And then Washburn continued, saying he jogged through the trails at Point Defiance Park prior to Jenny being found and recalled smelling a foul odor, but he didn't know what it was. He also mentioned that he was at the park on one of the 3 days when it was cordoned off and they wouldn't let him in. Okay, so in retrospect, Washburn seemed a little fishy. He called in a tip on Michelle's case about information pertaining not to Puget Park, but Point Defiance Park. And when he was finally interviewed about that after Jenny had been killed, he put himself in the park, close enough to Jenny's body that he could smell decomposition. But Washburn was labeled as an other, a not suspect, not witness, and his report was filed as low priority. There were so many tips, so many names in the file, so very many suspicious men, that his name simply got buried until Dr. Fitzpatrick unearthed it 3 decades later.
Every day, predators are targeting children and teens online. The Department of Homeland Security's Know to Protect campaign provides resources to combat online child exploitation and abuse. Learn how you can help protect our kids online and join the fight. Visit knowtoprotect.gov so together we can stop online child exploitation. That's KNOW, 2, protect.gov.
Detective Jennifer Quillo of the TPD looked into Washburn. He was the right age to have been a murderer in 1986. He was a white male, and he had green eyes, just as the Parabon phenotype had predicted. Surveillance quickly confirmed that Washburn resided at the same address where the FBI had collected buccal swabs more than a year earlier at 707 East Bullock Avenue in Eureka. He lived with his disabled adult daughter and was her primary caregiver. Detective Quillo and Detective Vold flew to Illinois on Tuesday, May 8, 2018, and mobilized with the Illinois State Police. They prepared arrest and search warrants and had them signed. Remember, unlike in genealogy cases, they already had a direct STR DNA sample in the form of a buccal swab from the suspect. They could go right to arrest without obtaining another sample of his DNA. This is from Detective Quillo's report. Quote, on May 10, 2018, the ISP contact team and SWAT element responded to the target location and upon arrival at the complex found Robert Washburn outside working on his vehicle. He was taken into custody at approximately 9:44 hours without incident and placed into Chief Collins's vehicle. Detective Riopel and Detective Larson were able to speak briefly with him there before he was transported to Woodford County Courthouse to be interviewed. This next little bit is from Detective Riopel's report. Detective Larson and I contacted Washburn as he was seated in the back of the police vehicle. I introduced myself as Detective Riopel and told him I would like to speak to him once he was transported to the sheriff's office. Washburn appeared very nervous and was sweating. He asked me what was going on, and I told him I would explain things once we were at the sheriff's office. He then asked me if he was going to need a lawyer. I told him I would address all of his questions once I finished arranging his transport. Washburn was very concerned about his disabled daughter who was still inside the apartment. He asked if she could go to the sheriff's office with him, and I told him she could not. I asked him who could take care of his daughter and if there were special medical instructions needed. He stated his mother, Maxine, was familiar with how to take care of her. Washburn then asked me if this was about that swab that he had given to the FBI about a year ago. I told him I didn't want to discuss things while he was seated in the back of a car in front of his neighbors. He nodded his head in agreement, and I told him I would see him at the sheriff's office. He was then transported to the sheriff's office by Eureka Police Chief Alex Collins. After Washburn was driven away, the SWAT team cleared the apartment and inside located Washburn's 25-year-old daughter. She suffered from cerebral palsy and was nonverbal and required a feeding tube. Washburn's mother was contacted to come and take custody of the young woman. Meanwhile, the residence was searched. This is all taken from Detective Quillo's report about the search of the cluttered but generally tidy apartment. There was nothing immediately identifiable as evidence directly tied to Jennifer Bastian. Of particular note in the apartment, however, was that a duffel bag was noted at the end of Washburn's bed. The duffel bag was packed and zipped and sitting on the bed. Inside the duffel bag, we found MREs, clothing, and toiletries. This appeared to be some type of go bag, in the event Washburn needed to leave the apartment immediately. We later found a very similar bag prepared in the daughter's room, packed with clothing and toiletries. There were also surveillance cameras placed in each of the 3 windows in the apartment. There was one in the front window pointing out to the front of the building and parking lot, one in the master bedroom window pointing to the back of the building, and one in the daughter's bedroom window also pointing outside. The cameras were all corded and appeared to run to the living room and could be monitored on the TV screen." End quote. They also found an unpermitted Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun in Washburn's closet. He knew they were coming. Also from inside Washburn's apartment were collected several computers, cell phones, external storage media, and some photographs. Many of these would prove to have child sex abuse material on them. In the course of dismantling Robert Washburn's life, the investigators learned that he maintained a 1983 Bluebird motorhome off-site. The lot owner reported that the trailer home didn't run, but that Washburn would visit at least once a month and spend several hours inside. No items of evidence were found in there, but based on what we know about his taste in online media, I bet I can guess what he was doing in there. So what do we know about Washburn? Robert Dwayne Washburn was born on November 29, 1957, to mother Maxine and father William C. Washburn. Washburn had 3 siblings, a brother and 2 sisters, and the family lived in Tacoma, where the father, William, operated an automotive repair business. Maxine and William divorced, and Washburn lived with his father in Tacoma, while his mother moved to Illinois. The family moved to Bellingham in the 70s, but ended up back in Tacoma. According to an interview with Washburn, he graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in Tacoma in 1977, where he claims to have lettered in track. His brother said in an interview that Washburn was an indifferent student. He attended Green River Community College, studying electrical engineering. He also attended Knapp College of Business, where he studied computer programming and general business. But according to his family, he really didn't want to work very hard, and he relied on the women in his life to be the breadwinners. Washburn married a woman named Linda, although it's unclear when. He says they married in 1984, but the media has reported they married in 1979. Either way, they divorced in 1985. Then he was married from 1989 to 1996 to a woman named Cindy. He had met Cindy while they were both working at Boeing. He was a mechanic and she was an engineer. They had their daughter together, the one who was born with cerebral palsy. He also had a relationship with a woman named Linda, and they had a son together. His mother, Maxine, later said in an interview that her son, Washburn, had anger issues, and his relationships with women didn't last very long. When Washburn and his wife Cindy split up, he retained custody of their daughter. The two moved to Illinois around 2002. He initially lived with his mother in Winona, and then he and his daughter moved to Streator. After approximately 2 years, Washburn moved back to Winona and then finally moved to Eureka, where he and his daughter had lived for about 8 to 9 years before his arrest. When he was arrested, he was unemployed. He said it was a full-time job, being the sole caregiver for his daughter. Washburn had one arrest for criminal trespass with vehicle prowling in King County, Washington, in December 1985. He had no record of sex crimes that would have in any way made him stand out as a suspect after he called in the tip on Michela's case. Detective Quillo interviewed Robert Washburn's mother, Maxine. She said that Washburn told her he had burned bridges in Washington state, and so he moved to Illinois for a fresh start. I'm going to tread delicately here, but I have to mention this. The detectives were very suspicious of Washburn, knowing what they did about what he had done, and his motivations for caring for his disabled daughter. Detective Quillo learned from Washburn's mother that he did everything for his daughter, including help her use the bathroom and change her sanitary napkins. Because the daughter was nonverbal and would not be able to tell anyone if she was being abused, the detectives were on high alert to any signs of exploitation. Detective Quillo asked Washburn's mother if she ever sensed anything illicit was going on. She said no. But she said one time Washburn complained to her that his neighbors, quote, thought he was having sex with Desiree, end quote, but he said that was crazy. So Detective Quillo interviewed the neighbors. Washburn's upstairs neighbor was named Nicole. Here's a quote from Detective Quillo's report. Quote, she said that Washburn kept to himself and never had a visitor that she knew of. She said that he cared for his daughter full time. I asked Nicole if she ever noticed anything unusual in the relationship between Washburn and his daughter, and she said she had not seen anything. However, sometimes in the middle of the night she would hear noises and hear the daughter laughing. Brown said the daughter had a very distinctive laugh due to her disability, and she thought it odd that whatever they were doing was going on between 1 and 2 a.m. Most of the neighbors thought that Washburn could be doing something sexually with the daughter. However, they had no evidence of that, and no one was able to describe why they thought that, end quote. So to be clear, there is no evidence that Washburn was abusing his daughter. It's interesting, though, that people who had no idea about Washburn's criminal past sensed that there was something fishy going on. Then Nicole told Detective Quillo something else. She said that the other unusual thing about Washburn was that the only other person that he spent time with was a 12-year-old girl who lived in the complex. This girl went to Washburn's apartment nearly every day and hung out there after school and on weekends. Nicole had seen Washburn give the girl presents and treats and described how he would say, "Oh, look what I found," and pull a chocolate or candy out of his pocket for her. Other residents of the complex, including this girl's mother's boyfriend, all told the mother that the situation was weird and inappropriate, but she didn't seem to pay attention. Detective Quillo spoke with the mother of this 12-year-old girl that all signs were pointing to Washburn grooming. She told her what Washburn had just been arrested for, sexually assaulting and murdering a 13-year-old girl. The mother admitted that her daughter hung out with the suspected child rapist and killer all the time, and that he gave her candy and sometimes took her for hikes outside the complex. But she said her daughter had never disclosed any inappropriate contact. In a forensic interview with the 12-year-old girl, she revealed no abuse. She said Washburn had photographed her doing gymnastics. And when Detective Quillo reviewed these photos, some were photos of the girl doing backbends and splits. As far as we know, that was it. But who knows how much farther Washburn would have taken things had he not been arrested and abruptly removed from the girl's life. I will say here that several of Washburn's neighbors in Eureka spoke to the media after his arrest and said that they were shocked. Many knew him as a friendly man who was always willing to help fix up a car or chat with passersby. This from the State Journal-Register, quote, Justin Bortline, who lived across the hall from Washburn for a year, said he was surprised. The Washburn he knew was Bob, a nice guy who would help him work on his Jeep when needed and who he had a few small conversations with. Nothing seemed out of the norm. The same went for Tracy Reese Sturgeon, who described Washburn as a compassionate man who took care of his daughter and stayed by himself. Some, however, thought it odd that he always kept his SUV covered with a tarp while in the parking lot, and that he had an elaborate camera system set up to monitor the apartment complex parking lot. His ex-wife Cindy told the Tacoma News Tribune, quote, "They put my ex-husband up there and I just about died. This is raw for me. This is upsetting. We never saw this coming. He was always gentle," end quote. Washburn's brother did an interview as well, and he said, quote, "I just can't believe it. You'd never have known it to know him." The brother acknowledged that he hadn't heard much from Washburn in recent years. They weren't close. He told the Tacoma News Tribune, quote, "I'm pretty disgusted with him. I can't believe he would do a thing like that. Whatever they do to him, if he done it, he deserves it." On May 10th of 2018, Robert Washburn was placed in an interview room with Tacoma detectives. This is Detective Steve Riopel's report upon arrest. Upon entering the room, Washburn was seated in a chair facing the camera. As an aside here, I'll note that he said, "What the fuck?" I took the handcuffs off him and offered him something to drink and use the bathrooms. He accepted a water, which I got for him. Washburn, "I'd like to know what this is about." Riopel, "Okay." Washburn, "Is this about what happened last February or March with the FBI? Riopel, "Well, let me explain. Let me explain everything to you in a minute." I then introduced myself and Detective Larson again. I told him we were from the Tacoma Police Department. He responded by saying, "This is about the swab then." Washburn then asked, "I went from a witness to a suspect?" I explained to him that before we talked about it, I wanted to advise him of his Miranda rights. So Riopel read him his rights. "Okay, do you understand those rights as I explained them?" Washburn, "I do, Riopel, "Okay. And then having been made fully aware of those rights, you don't want to talk to me about this, or you can waive these rights voluntarily and we can have a discussion about things." Washburn, "No, I better get a lawyer." Riopel, "Okay." Washburn, "And I know that makes me look guilty, but it's just the way it looks, okay?" He went on to say there were things that he could say that would make him look like shit, and that's a quote. Riopel said, "I told him that the swab he provided to the FBI in March 2017 was a match, and he was going to be arrested for murder." He responded by saying, "I did not kill that little girl." Well, no one had mentioned that the murder he was being accused of involved a little girl. Whoops. As the detectives were leaving the room, Detective Larson asked Washburn if he had any questions for the investigators. Washburn stated he wanted to know how he became a suspect. He said, my DNA was all over that park." I told Washburn I could not talk to him about it because he had asked for an attorney. Washburn stated he would talk to me if he had an attorney with him. I told him I would try to arrange for an attorney for him to speak with. The detectives left the room. Washburn was recorded saying a bunch of unintelligible things under his breath, but what we can hear was stuff like, "God damn, I didn't kill that little girl. Son of a bitch. I didn't kill that little girl. I didn't kill her. What the F? Son of a bitch. I didn't kill her. I did not do this. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. God damn it. I know I didn't. I didn't do it. I didn't do this. Something to get to my daughter. She's going to be just unintelligible. I didn't do this. I didn't do this." Woodford County Chief Public Defender Andrew Langton was called to come meet with Washburn in a private room. After approximately 10 to 15 minutes, Langton stated Washburn was not going to make a statement. Washburn was then booked into the Woodford County Jail. I found this part really interesting given what's happening now in the Delphi case. For those of you who don't know, on February 14, 2017, Abigail Williams and Liberty German were murdered on a hiking trail in broad daylight on public land in Delphi, Indiana. Police searched for a suspect for 5 years before finally making an arrest in 2022. But because 60-year-old Robert Washburn was arrested on suspicion of a similar child murder and was living in Illinois, which is not far from Indiana, the Delphi authorities had been notified of this 2018 arrest. The Delphi police chief, Steve Mullen, requested to talk with Washburn about the murders of Abby and Libby. Mullen advised Washburn of his Miranda warnings, and Washburn agreed to talk to him. He willingly gave a bunch of biographical information, and then he looked at the Abby and Libby flyer and said he had nothing to do with it. Somewhat surprisingly, he agreed to give a DNA sample to the Delphi chief. I guess he figured they already had his DNA, so why not? On May 3, 2018, Detective Riopel received a report from the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab. It stated a match was found between the swimsuit sperm fraction profile in the Jennifer Bastian case and Robert Washburn. the estimated probability of selecting an unrelated individual at random from the U.S. population with a matching profile was 1 in 57 trillion. So Washburn lawyered up, and after he was extradited to Washington state, official murder charges were filed against him. He was being represented by counsel and, of course, would not speak with investigators. Luckily, though, he spoke at length with someone else. Here are excerpts from 2 interviews Detective Holt conducted with Washburn's cellmate, Stephen Knickerbocker, in September 2018. Holt: all right, Stephen, I'm Detective Holt. You're not in trouble with me. Knickerbocker: Holt: I was just informed last night by one of the jailers that you had some information you wanted to pass along. Knickerbocker: oh, about Washburn. He said, yeah, he just been telling me everything, man. I mean, he's just been telling me shit that, Holt: like, what's he telling you? Knickerbocker: I don't know if it's true. Well, I mean, a lot of shit. A lot of shit. Now, and he's done it and all that. Holt: okay. Probably trying to figure out what Knickerbocker's saying. Knickerbocker: got off in this weird telling. Like he's getting excited telling me about it, and it's like, Holt says, what kind of stuff has he been telling you? Knickerbocker: well, I don't, that he did it. Holt: he did what? Knickerbocker: that he killed that girl. Holt: okay, but he didn't actually come out and tell you, the day he saw her in the park and how he got her to where she was or anything like that. He just said he killed her. Is that right? Knickerbocker: no, he said he was jogging. Holt: oh, he was jogging? Knickerbocker: yeah, he said he was jogging, yeah. Detective Holt: okay, tell me. This is why I just want you to tell me how. Knickerbocker: that's what he said he went to the park for all the time. He said he went to the park all the time looking for sex. Detective Holt: okay. Knickerbocker said, yeah, he said that's what he went to the park for all the time. He jogged. He said that's what happened in the park all the time. He goes, thousands of people do it all the time. He said that he found a bike and he stashed it in the park. And he stashed it in some sticker bushes. And he said that later on the news, he's seen that they had pictures of the girl and the bike on the thing on the news. So he went back and he wiped down the bike and everything and left the bike there. Holt: okay. Knickerbocker: and he said he decided to look for her to see if he could find her. And he said he found her, and she was already dead, Holt: Knickerbocker: and then he just stood over her and effing jacked off. Holt: that's the way he told you that? Knickerbocker: yeah. Holt: okay. Knickerbocker: he said, he goes, I'm just a freak. I'm just a freak. That's all I am. I asked him before, well, how was she killed? And he goes, strangled. And then he keeps going back to this one because he's excited as hell about this one that he's arrested about, because he said she was just effing gorgeous, man. She was exquisite, 13 years old. And I'm like, wow, man, you are a sick motherfucker, aren't you? You know what I'm saying? Because he said, I'm just twisted. Oh, and he told me, and so I just figured, he said, I asked him about the clothes because he said he didn't touch her or nothing like that. He just found her and she's already dead. And he just jacked off because he twisted like that. He just got off on the fact that here's this 13-year-old girl that looks effing gorgeous. And he said, and she's just perfect and had no clothes on. But she had clothes on her right leg or something. He said she didn't have a top on. She didn't have anything else on, but he said that she had clothes on her right leg. Holt: no doubt thinking, gotcha. Knickerbocker: or some shit, so she was naked, because I kept asking him, was she naked? Did you touch her? Did you do anything to her while she was dead? He goes, no, but I've thought about fucking somebody that was dead. I'm like, man, so but he did tell me specifically. I'll take a polygraph on this. He did tell me that he did it. Finally, he said that it was yesterday at lunchtime, right when we sat down getting ready to eat, before he was getting ready to eat, and he just sat down and said, you're right, I did it. I'm like, wow. It just fucking came out, and he just told me that he did it. And the way he's been trying to go all around this shit. All of a sudden, we just sit down for lunch, and he just blurted it out. There was nobody there, just me and him waiting for him to open up the something unintelligible to get our thing. He goes, you know what we were talking about? He goes, you're right, I did it. So just to clarify a little bit here, initially Robert Washburn told his cellmate that he just found a bike in the park. And after he found out about Jenny's murder, he went back and wiped it down in case his fingerprints were found on it. Next, he said he had found Jenny's body, but she was already dead, and he masturbated over her. Finally, when they were having lunch, he blurted out, you're right, I did it. And at this point in the conversation, Knickerbocker went to leave the cell, apparently to report on what his cellmate was talking about. Back to the interview. Knickerbocker, I said, it's probably an attorney visit or whatever. He goes, whatever you do, don't say nothing about what we talked about. So why would I do that? I wouldn't do that. I said, I told you, man, you can tell me anything. So, and then he stockpiled up a bunch of stuff. After they came and got his DNA, he's been stockpiling all this food and stuff, this special stuff his daughter has to have. Because he knew that they were coming and he was stocking it up. So his sister had a bunch of 6 months, 8 months supply of all this special stuff that she needed that he built up, Holt says, okay. Knickerbocker, because he acted like he knew that they were coming, but he's a cool cucumber, man. He's gotten away with it this long, you know what I mean? Holt, Knickerbocker, and he was saying, well, it's over for me, It's just over for me. I just want the death penalty and all this shit. I just want them to give me the death penalty. I want to make sure that it's on the table. And he starts talking about it's over. And I was like, what do you mean it's over? I said, nothing's ever over. I mean, what do you mean? He goes, I'll never come back. I'm not going to be back here. And I said, what do you mean you won't be back here? He goes, Steve, I did it. Man, he says, I am never going to be back. I'm going to go there and I'm going to see if they'll just fucking put me to death. The death penalty on the table, man. Fuck it. I don't want my family to know that I did. Actually, I don't want anybody to know that I did. He said he just wants this over with. He just kept saying, I just want this to be over with. I said, well, what do you mean? And he did it. He said, I killed her, man. I killed her and I raped her. And it wasn't what I told you about me finding her and jacking off like that. He said, I did it. Detective Holt says, let me ask you this, Stephen. Obviously, you said he admitted to the one in Washington. Knickerbocker says, right? Holt says, did he tell you why he did it or if he knew the girl? Knickerbocker, that he was a sick fuck. He said that she was exquisite. And all he said that he's been following her family ever since then, too. I mean, he knows that the father died a year ago. It was 3 years ago, actually. The whole bit. He just said he's been keeping contact, not contact with the family. But I think he was stalking her. I think it was something that he's seen. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing, that he was stalking her, that he wanted her. Indeed, that's what he was in the park for. And the moment arose and it was a good time and he pounced because he said she was exquisite. She was beautiful. I had to have her, he said. And that's what he was saying when he first told me about, the bike and jacking off and he found her. Detective Holt says, Knickerbocker says, and he was just all excited, I think. She was just beautiful. She had a beautiful body. She's gorgeous. She's exquisite. I just, I couldn't help myself. I'm just a sick, kinky fuck, like that. So that's what it was, So that's what he did. He stalked her because he told me for 32 years or 31 years or whatever, how long he's followed the family. Told me their name. I can't remember what it was, but he said their name and everything. Said the father died just a year ago and everything. That they were for the death penalty back. And this is what he said last night, that they were for the death penalty back then. And so he should have no problem getting the death penalty now and all that stuff like that. So, and that's where the relevant part of the interview ended. It's clear that Stephen Knickerbocker felt very much that Washburn had done some other bad things. He said as much, saying that he wanted the death penalty so his family wouldn't have to hear about what he'd done. He alluded over and over to what a sicko he was and how there were things he had done.
Every day, predators are targeting children and teens online. The Department of Homeland Security's Know to Protect campaign provides resources to combat online child exploitation and abuse. Learn how you can help protect our kids online and join the fight. Visit knowtoprotect.gov so together we can stop online child exploitation. That's KNOW, 2, protect.gov.
Forensic examination of the computers and other electronic materials found in Washburn's apartment yielded lots of disturbing stuff. Videos were found with actors depicting scenes in which a woman was killed and then a man had sex with her dead body. In one of them, a woman was strangled with a ligature while her killer had intercourse with her. In another, a man ambushed a woman in the woods and then had sex with her dead body. Of course, this brought Jennifer Bastian, whom Washburn was known to have killed, immediately to mind. And remember that Washburn told Knickerbocker that he had found Jenny dead and was sexually excited by this. Clearly, he's not only a pedophile, but a necrophiliac. Oh, and a murderer. At the conclusion of the examination and review of all the computers and electronic storage media recovered in the Eureka, Illinois apartment of Robert Washburn, 3 computer disks were found to contain depictions of minors engaged in sexually explicit conduct. 31 images were bookmarked in particular, showing nude, prepubescent minor children engaged in sexually explicit conduct as well as sexually posed. From a detective's report, quote, I also noted 2 images of what appeared to be a prepubescent male child's genitalia, with what appeared to be an adult male hand exposing it. There was also 1 video where a young child appeared to be ejaculated on. 1 image was also located, which appeared to depict a minor individual posed in a sexual position, end quote. Even more disturbing, on a laptop of Washburn's, the forensic team found 10 to 15 images of minors engaged in sexually explicit conduct, and these images appeared to be homemade or amateur shots, meaning that Washburn or someone he had obtained them from had personally taken the photos. The only upside to all this horror, Detective Quillo provided the images of child sexual abuse to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they were able to confirm and identify 2 different child victims. Information like this, about who the victims are, can lead to identification of their abusers and help put a stop to child exploitation. Finally, an old cell phone of Washburn's showed that he was following the news about arrests, cold cases, and missing persons in Washington state. In 2013, he had also visited KidsLiveSafe.com, a website dedicated to keeping children safe from sex offenders. When it came time to tell Patty Bastian about the news that Robert Washburn had been arrested and that his DNA profile matched that in Jenny's case, recently retired Detective Lindsay Wade wanted to be the one to do it. She and Assistant Tacoma Police Chief Sean Gustafson drove to Patty's home to tell her the news. They knocked on her door around 8 a.m. and woke her up. As soon as Patty saw them on her doorstep, she knew. Detective Wade said, "We got him." As Patty said, they both dissolved into a puddle. After they pulled themselves together, Patty called Teresa in Texas and had Detective Wade talk to her to tell her as well. They also called Detective Wolf Werner, who had retired from the case years earlier, but always inquired about its status. Not solving the case prior to his retirement had irked him, just as it had Detective Wade. Patty later spoke to the Tacoma News-Tribune, saying, quote, "We were overwhelmed by this 32 years ago, and we continue to be overwhelmed today. We never gave up on wanting justice for Jenny. Tacoma never gave up on wanting justice for Jenny, and now, after all this time, justice is Jenny's." Pierce County Prosecutor Mark Lindquist said of Jenny's murder, quote, "It has affected the way we parent. Every parent in this community is haunted by her case." Washburn was initially charged with first-degree murder, which required premeditation. At his arraignment on May 25th, prosecutors added aggravating factors of sexual motivation and deliberate cruelty, which would make Washburn eligible for life in prison if he were to be convicted. He pleaded not guilty and bail was set at $5 million. The arraignment was the first time that Patty and Teresa Bastian had seen Jenny's killer. The 2 women faced the media outside the courthouse afterwards. Patty described Washburn as nondescript, the kind of man you wouldn't look twice at on the street. She said, quote, "It's just an awesome experience that he's here off the streets and he can't hurt anyone else." Teresa said it had been a long 32 years, and she said she hoped he would confess and spare everyone a trial. Teresa pointed out that she was just 15 when her sister was taken, and it had colored her entire adult life. She didn't expect that the person who had committed this crime that had loomed over her and Patty for 3 decades would appear so inconsequential. She said, quote, "He seemed too old and small and weak. It's definitely not what I pictured," end quote. Well, they never are, and that's the problem. These guys don't look like monsters on the outside. Their common and banal human facades mask the depravity and darkness lurking on the inside. Monsters are real, and all the scarier because they look like everyone else. On January 19, 2019, Jenny's case took a turn. The Pierce County Prosecutor's Office announced that Robert Washburn had agreed to plead guilty to her murder. On January 25th, Washburn pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The aggravating factors were dropped. The prosecutor read the spare facts Washburn was required to admit to aloud in court. Washburn saw Jenny riding her bike in Point Defiance Park on August 4th, 1986. He grabbed her arm, dragged her to the hidden location in the woods off the trail, and strangled her. As these facts were read, Washburn stared at his lap, never making eye contact with anyone and showing no reaction. However, Washburn did offer a written statement that Judge Martin read to the court. It read in its entirety, quote, "Almost as soon as the court process began, I desired to plead guilty and resolve the case, asking for nothing in return. I did not want the Bastian family nor my own to have to endure any additional anguish that would have undoubtedly resulted from a lengthy trial and appellate process. I am here today to take responsibility for this offense, and I sincerely hope that by doing so, the Bastian family is one step closer in their ultimate healing process. I am deeply sorry for the death of Jennifer. I recognize there is little that my words can do to diminish the tremendous sense of pain and loss that this crime caused to so many." End quote. Patty Bastian addressed the courtroom talking about a cloud of fear and foreboding that the family experienced on summer days like the one on which Jenny disappeared. Quote, "You stole that from us. No longer were we able to look at beautiful summer days the same way. For us, normalcy disappeared on August 4th, the day you decided Washburn would be a good day to savagely murder our 13-year-old girl. After that, not a day went by in a normal way," said Patty. Teresa spoke next. She talked about how she refused to ever ride a bike again because of what had happened to her sister. She addressed Washburn directly, saying, "You made me an only child. My kids will never know their Auntie Jenny because of you," Teresa said. "The world is a worse place because of you." And she reminded the court that even though he was expressing contrition, he did not come forward. He was caught by law enforcement. When it was time for the sentencing, Judge Martin called what Washburn did grotesque and said, quote, "Jennifer's life was stolen right as she was poised to begin it." He gave Washburn 320 months, nearly 27 years in prison, with credit for 247 days' time served. This was on the high end of the sentence recommended by the state. Washburn will serve a minimum of 20 years, and his DNA will be entered into CODIS. Further, he is prohibited from ever having any contact with the Bastian family. As he was led out of the courtroom, Teresa quietly said, "Bye, Felicia." After the proceeding, Patty Bastian addressed the media outside the courthouse, saying that she felt extreme relief. She had observed that Washburn could not look the family in the eye and looked down throughout the proceeding. Quote, "I guess that's the picture of a guilty man. It's just mind-boggling. He went to the park and just decided, I'm going to kill a child." She did acknowledge that she was grateful to Washburn that they did not have to go through a trial. The Bastian family felt that justice had been served, and finally Jenny's killer was where he belonged. Okay, so what actually happened on the day Jenny was taken? 28-year-old Robert Washburn was already divorced and living with a girlfriend in a home in the 3100 block of North Huson Street, just 9 blocks northeast from the Bastians, closer to Point Defiance Park. Washburn told the police and his cellmate, Knickerbocker, that he jogged in Point Defiance Park daily. Remember, that's what he said in the tip he called in on Michela's killer. But police learned from an interview with an ex-wife of Washburn's named Cindy that Washburn didn't jog. In fact, Cindy used to tease him about being non-athletic. I think it's much more likely that, as Knickerbocker reported, Washburn was in the park looking for a victim. We don't know if he had seen Jenny before or not. Patty confirmed that they didn't know Robert Washburn, but remember that Knickerbocker, the cellmate, said that Washburn had seen Jenny, whom he described as exquisite, and coveted her. We don't know if he meant that day or on days prior. I think it's entirely possible that he had noticed Jenny zipping around on her distinctive bike with blue saddlebags and decided to take her. But he certainly could have been in search of any child target he could isolate and assault. Detective Lindsay Wade believes this was the case. But one thing is clear. Investigators believe that the crime was premeditated. Charging documents included that the area where Jenny was located appeared to have been prepared in advance of her body being placed there. Washburn had learned from the murder and immediate discovery of Michela Welch that Michela's killer had not been prepared. He had hastily dumped her body where it was located within hours, giving police several leads to her assailant. And Washburn wanted to be able to take his time with the victim. He needed privacy to engage in the horrific fantasy possibly implanted in his mind by Michela's case. Washburn was evidently obsessed with Michela's murder. After all, he called in a tip about a sketchy man he alleged he'd seen in Point Defiance Park. In reality, he was studying the work of the predator who'd gone before him, and probably got a frisson of pleasure injecting himself into Michela's case on what was almost certainly a made-up tip, and then on being interviewed in Jenny's. He was going to do the same thing, but do it better. The ultimate copycat crime down to the bicycle and the appearance of the victim. I have to believe, given that it was broad daylight and there were zillions of people in the park on that hot summer day, Washburn planted himself right near the trail leading to the lair he'd prepared for his victim. When she came along on her bike alone, He would have glanced around for witnesses and then jumped out and grabbed her. As he said, he clutched her arm and marched her into the woods. The fact that Jenny's helmet was found neatly stowed in her saddlebag points to her being the one who removed it. Perhaps she was told to walk her bike, and when they got to the pre-selected spot to take off her helmet, he wanted to see her face. The whole attack was so brazen, so risky. I have to believe Washburn fantasized about it for months, turning over in his mind the best way to pull it off. And pull it off he did. At least until the spot of DNA he left behind on Jenny's swimsuit revealed his repulsive secret at long last. Speaking of the swimsuit, I asked Detective Lindsay Wade what her theory is about why Jenny's bathing suit was around her ankle, yet defiled with semen. As an experienced sex crimes detective, I figured Detective Wade would have a theory that made sense. And she did. She told me she believes that Jenny was told or permitted to redress after her initial assault before she was killed. She said sometimes these killers prefer to have their victims put their clothes back on, so their acts do not appear so shameful, as though they can cover up what they just did. But Washburn always intended to kill her. And once Jenny was dead, either Washburn pulled her bathing suit down and raped her dead body, or he returned to the scene over the next few days and committed necrophilia. Remember, the videos found in Washburn's apartment depicting men having sex with deceased women. It was all part of his twisted fantasy. After 33 years, Jenny Bastian's case is closed thanks to Y-DNA analysis. And if you're one of the bad guys, they're coming for you. Just a note, instead of a Doe case next week, I will be bringing you the conclusion of the Michelle Welch case. Recently, I let listeners know about a new benefit available to them called an AbJack Insider subscription that's available through Apple Podcasts. An AbJack Insider subscription will give listeners ad-free access to every bit of DNA ID content published, both past episodes and future episodes. It will also give you benefits like early access and bonus content. Head over to Apple Podcasts and click on the DNA ID show page or the AbJack Entertainment channel to start a free trial. Thanks for listening to this episode of DNA ID. If you'd like to listen to the show ad-free and help support the show in the process, please head over to patreon.com/DNAID. And if you're interested in some fun DNA ID merch, visit the store at customizedgirl.com/s/DNAID podcast. To contact the show, please email us at dnaidpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on social media at DNAID Podcast on Instagram, at DNAID Podcast on Twitter, or on Facebook at facebook.com/DNAID Podcast. Finally, if you want to visit our website, go to dnaidpodcast.com. You'll be able to get all the episodes of the show, leave comments on episodes that I can respond to, and you can even leave voicemails. You'll get all the latest news about the show and important updates. Find links to our social media, merch, and a lot more. It's really your one-stop shop for everything DNA ID. DNA ID is written, researched, and hosted by me, Jessica Betancourt. It's produced by me and Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Music by Connor Betancourt. Check out our other collaborative podcasts, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, and Beyond Bizarre True Crime.